Hello there, welcome to lesson number 10 in our series on using FluidDesigner for 3D printing. In this lesson we're going to show you how you can create a torus ring and add your name in text around the outside of the ring. So if you start off FluidDesigner, first thing that we need to do is to go to Learning Projects, Jewellery Projects, Rings. And we're doing lesson number 10, so it's number 10, Name Embossed. Drag and drop that onto the workspace. I'll just start the screencast key, so key presses that I make should be displayed here, and just adjust these panels slightly. So this is what we're going to do in this lesson. We're going to create this ring with your name, or my name in this instance, written around the outside of the ring. Now depending upon what you're printing this in, what metal or what plastic, and depending upon where you're getting it printed, the thickness here or this depth are going to be important factors, so you do need to consider that depending upon, say, where you're going to get it printed. But we're going to show the principles of how to create this. If you find you have to do this thicker, then clearly you can just modify the text size or something like that, scale it up in FluidDesigner before you try and print it. But anyway, let's continue. Let's see how we can actually create this ring. So if we go to Add Mesh, Torus Object and Twisted Torus. So Add Mesh, Torus Objects and Twisted Torus, that's what we're going to do. And we're going to set the major radius to 10. The minor radius to 2. I'm going to keep the major segments. The major segments will be the number of segments going around the outside of it. And we're going to keep the minor segments. The minor segments are the number of segments going around in this direction. So major segments is that way, minor is that. We're going to keep the twists at 1. Okay, so that's all we're actually going to change in this one. Now clearly you do need to know what the internal diameter is of the ring that you're going to create. If I just go to View and Top, we're in perspective mode at the moment, so let me just change it from perspective to ortho. So at the moment this one, if I use the interactive ruler, the diameter of this ring at the moment is 16 millimeters. So if you needed a size greater than that, you would need to scale this up, as we've shown you previously. I'm not actually going to do that in this instance. I'm going to leave it as it is. But I am going to change the Z dimension. I'm going to change it to 10 millimeters because I need some thickness here in order to put the name around. So I'm going to change this value to 10 millimeters. That gives it some depth. Now whenever you scale in FluidDesigner, you must always remember to do Control A and apply the scale. So this box needs to be ticked, apply the scale, otherwise you will have problems in printing. Okay, so I've just changed the depth of this to 10 millimeters. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use something called a Nurbs Circle. A Nurbs Circle, and the Nurbs Circle, we're going to use that object, that curve, to wrap it around the outside of our torus. So we need to go to Add Curve and Nurbs Circle, and what we now need to do, the Nurbs Circle is in the center here. What we want to do is we want to scale this object up so that it just pops through the outside face of our torus. So point the mouse towards the center and press S on the keyboard to scale. You can see the Nurbs Circle increasing. And what we want to do is we want to keep pulling until it just it just pops through the surface of the torus, and then we can click the left mouse button. So we're going to use that Nurbs circle to locate the text on the outside of the torus. Now the next thing we want to do is to actually add the text. Now because that's a curve, we don't actually need to reset the scale on that object. Well, actually, go on, we better do, yeah, because the vector values have changed here. So if we do Control A, with it still highlighted, if we apply the scale, we're not going to print that particular object, so it's not important from that point of view. So applying the scale for that is not vital. We need to apply the scale and reset it back to 1 on objects that we print. We are not going to print that object. So the next thing we need to do is to add the text. So we're going to go to Add and Text. And in the Properties panel now, what we need to, well, if we zoom in, we can see where the text is at the moment. That's the text, and it's just the word text. Okay. In the Properties panel, you'll notice that we've got a little F here for font or for text. So if we click on this is Show the Text Data Information. And we want to make some changes here. Well, the first thing we're going to do is to change the text size, and we're going to change it up to a size of 10. And we're also going to align it in the center. So you can see the word text there now more clearly. And we're also going to use the extrude value. Now the extrude value is going to give this object some depth, some thickness. So when we click on extrude of 1 millimeter, you can see what's happening to the text, and that 1 millimeter is 1 millimeter above the grid and 1 millimeter below, so we've got a total thickness of 2 millimeters. And it is important with text that you do understand how thick it is, because you know it does affect whether or not it will print. If you create text that is say less than 0.8 of a millimeter in total thickness, you're going to have problems. It's not going to print. So you do generally need something more than 1 millimeter. Here we've got it that's 2 millimeters. So what do we want to do next? Well, we want to change the word text, and we can do that by clicking on Edit Text. And now if I hit the backspace key on my keyboard, you can see the word text is disappearing, and I'm now going to type in my name. So P-A-U-L, oops, it looks like I missed out the A, P-A-U-L space S-U-M-M-E-R-S. So I can just zoom back out there. Now, as you can see at the moment, this text is not lined up properly, so we're going to need to rotate it, and we're actually going to need to rotate it twice. So first of all, I'm going to, if you follow the instructions in the help panel here, this is the X direction here. Oh, where am I? Yeah, we've got the text. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we need to exit edit mode. Sorry, I haven't exited edit mode. Okay, we can see the red arrow here, so I'm going to rotate the text and bring it up vertically. So if I press R on the keyboard, X to limit the rotation about the X-axis, and if I type 90, you'll see that that's brought my text up to that position there, so that's looking good. But something that I also need to do is I need to flip this right round the other direction and have Paul this way and Summers that way. And the way we can do that is if we rotate it about the Z axis. We need to do this rotation because of the way the text is actually applied to the ring. So we need to do rotate, restrict it to the Z axis, so R and Z, and we want to rotate it 180 degrees. So as you can see, I've just literally flipped it right the way round. So now what we need to do is we need to attach this text now to the curve. So what we need to do is to go to the modifiers icon, and we're going to add a curve modifier. A curve modifier. And what we need to do is to select the object, the Nurbs Circle. So we're attaching the text. We've currently got the text selected. We're attaching it to the Nurbs Circle, and remember the Nurbs Circle goes around the outside of the ring. So we've added a curve modifier, and we've linked up the text to the Nurbs Circle. And the rotating of the text about the Z-axis means that it's lined up this way round. If I didn't rotate it about the Z-axis, this would be back to front. So what do we want to do now? So we need to, if we go to view, and if we view it from the front and zoom in, clearly we need to move this text down so that it's in the center of the ring. We do need to ensure that the text goes through the ring itself. So if I just go to wireframe and zoom in, you do need to check that the text is going into the ring, and if you look there, it is on the inside of the ring. And really, strictly speaking, we ought to measure the thickness of the text on the outside of the ring. So we've got about 1.36 millimeters of text outside, and presumably about 0.7 millimeters inside the cylinder. Inside the torus, not the cylinder, inside the torus. So I can, that's okay, I'm quite happy with that. So I can switch back to material mode now. Now the next thing that we want to do is to combine these two objects. Well, first of all, actually, we need to change this text into a mesh. And this is usual in FluidDesigner, so yeah, we need to apply this modifier. And as usual in FluidDesigner, we need to go to Tools, Object Tools, and convert it to a mesh. Okay, so the torus is a mesh and the text is a mesh. The next thing we want to do is join the two together. Now before I do that, I'm actually going to delete this original one so we don't get confused as to what object is what. So I'm going to delete that one. And if I highlight the torus now, so the twisted torus is highlighted, I want to join that twisted torus with the text. And the way we do that is to apply a modifier, and the modifier we're going to use is called a Boolean modifier. And we want to create a union. We want to combine two meshes in an additive way. I want to create a union between the twisted torus and the text that says my name. And as you can see, it's done that. And there are some yellow lines here which we'll explain in a second. So that says that it's working, the modifier. But what we need to do is to apply this modifier now. So again, as always the case, we need to go to Tools, Object Tools, and convert it to a mesh. So that will confirm the modifier. But as is always the case when you use Booleans, you always get a duplicate copy of one of the objects. And as you can see, the text, Paul Summers, is still there, so we can highlight that and delete it. We can also delete this Nurbs Circle, highlight it, and then X to delete. We don't need that anymore. And we can just move our ring back up into the center. Not vital exactly where it is. Okay, so there's the text, Paul Summers, wrapped around this ring. Now, it's not as smooth as perhaps it could be, this ring. So we could do another modifier here. We could apply a subsurf modifier. And that will smooth off. If I just delete it again, you can see the ring is quite chunky at the moment. The subsurf modifier will smooth it off. And the higher this value, the smoother the surface will be. However, you do need to be careful because file size goes up. Things could start to get a bit too thin. They might not print. So I'm just going to leave it down at a subsurf value of 1. You will obviously need to play around with it to see what is printable and isn't on your system. But the principle of this is what's important. Now we must apply this modifier if we're going to set up a subsurf modifier. So again, Tools, Object Tools, and convert it to a mesh. So there's our finished ring now. slightly smoothed off. So what we need to do is to save it. So go File and Save As, and come up through the menu system and save it in My Projects, Jewellery Projects, Rings as lesson number 10, name Embossed. Embossed means the text comes out from the object. Engraved means on the inside. So we ought to, we can't go to Netfab just yet. We need to export it first of all in a printable file format. So we can export it as a wavefront object to the desktop as lesson number 10, name Embossed as an object file. Then go to Netfab and just check this mesh. So go to the desktop and open name Embossed, and as I would have suspected, there are some problems, but if we go to extras and repair the part, as you can see, if we click on update, there's quite a few holes, quite a few border edge problems, and it's all to do with around the text. But if we run automatic repair and execute it and click update, well done, Netfab's done its job again. No edge problems, no orientation, no holes, one shell. So the only real issue is whether or not this text is sticking out enough. It should be, and we measured it at 1.3. The other issue could be the thickness of some bits of this text. You would need to look at that carefully depending upon what your printer will cope with. But we need to apply that repair and remove the old part, and then save it. So we go to Part, export the part as a wavefront object, export it to the desktop. So the repaired file is the file that you should be able to send to the printer. Oops, we've got another problem. Manifold edges. Well, okay. I don't quite understand why Netfab does a double check here, but the way to solve this, hopefully, is to click Optimize. And it's just done some further checks. It's made some further corrections. We've got a tick, so we can now export that. And fair enough, that is the printable file format now. So that's it. That's the end of today's lesson, how you can add text to an object. Thank you.